Good morning, Women's Heart. We are here this morning with Lena Beal, who is our cardiovascular therapeutic dietitian at Piedmont, and we are diving in today all about grains and carbs, and this is our level 2 workshop that we are jumping into from our first one that we had a few months ago. So thank you all for joining us. And without further ado, I will go ahead and introduce Lena. Lena is a registered licensed dietitian with a passion for teaching people to live a balanced lifestyle. Over time, Lena really found that there is so much more than to helping people navigate through nutrition and wellness, much more than dieting. And her career began in food science research throughout her undergrad and graduate studies, and so she later developed a strong affinity for critical care nutrition and as a nutrition support dietitian for surgery and burn patients. Lena has over 20 years experience ranging from clinical to sports nutrition and policy. She's served 8 years as a legislative chair for both Greater Atlanta and Georgia Association of Nutrition and Dietetics, and is a trusted food and nutrition expert, appearing often in local TV and media outlets. Lena is currently serving the cardiovascular dietitian and heart health media expert at Piedmont Atlanta Hospital, and she serves as the direct services for cardiac rehab, Piedmont Heart Institute, and the Samsky Advanced Heart Failure Center. We are so excited to welcome Lena today. She is just a wealth of information and an expert in her field, and she is going to just give us all of the details and information about so many different types of grains and carbs and how we can incorporate them into our diets and nutrition effectively and healthily. So thank you so much, Lena, for being here.
And thank you, Robin, for having me. I'm excited about the topic this morning of whole grains. It actually is certainly one of our diet modification factors that we use for our cardiac patients. When we talk about lowering cardiac risk, and of course being Heart Month, we want folks to tend to those things in their diet that would yield heart health. So what we'll begin to talk to today, we're hoping that those who are tuning in will learn the definition of a whole grain, also the difference between whole and refined grains, and then also the benefits of whole grains and how to incorporate more of them into their diets. So all grains start off as whole grains, which is the entire seed of the plant, and we will go into that. So the industry calls that a kernel, that whole seed with all three key edible parts, the bran, the germ, and the endosperm, and each of those play a role in the nutrients that grain provides. So all of those are protected within the entire seed of the plant, but of course in processing, that differentiates one grain from another, and that's what we're going to go through first. So whole grains. Whole grains consist of the entire seed, including the bran, germ, and endosperm, all three parts, and they may be eaten whole, cracked, split, flaked, or ground. So most often they're milled into flour and used in a variety of foods. All right. So let's go through the three parts of this seed. Go ahead. So the bran is the outer skin, and it contains the antioxidants that are good for cancer prevention, the B vitamins, and fiber. B vitamins are used to fortify a lot of whole grain breakfast cereals and kids and such, and bread products, simply because this is something that was found to be deficient back in the earlier 1900s, and so eventually it evolved such that these products were fortified with B vitamins. The germ is the embryo, which has the potential to sprout into a new plant, and it contains also B vitamins, some protein, which is mostly where you're going to find your gluten, minerals, and healthy fats. And then lastly is the endosperm, and this is the seed's food supply. It provides the energy so it can send roots down for water and such. So of course, if you're growing things at home and you're teaching lessons to your children about how things grow and sprout, then let them know that this is how the seed regenerates. It's the largest portion of the kernel, and it contains the carbohydrate, proteins, and small amounts of vitamins and minerals. So let's talk about some common whole grain products that we'll find in the supermarket. You can go ahead. I think it's 6. So there's whole wheat flour, oatmeal, popcorn, brown rice, bulgur, and buckwheat. And then we have another slide here showing some other versions of whole grains that you may also find. I mean, there is a multitude of whole grains. There are a multitude of whole grains available. So you have a variety depending on whether you are a convenience type food person, a meal in 30 minutes chef, or all the way down, to full on, home chef, aficionado, gourmet cook. So, and all of these can take on different roles, different flavors in your everyday lives and recipes. So whole grains are a great alternative for people who have celiac disease or who are intolerant to gluten, which is the protein, again, found in wheat, barley, rye, and some other grains. So watch for gluten-free products made with other whole grain flours. So distinguishing which is which can sometimes be tough, but I always point people to the food label because it has a lot of ingredients there, a lot of information, there. So first on the nutrition facts label, which tells you the actual nutrient profile of the product, but also then go to the ingredients list. And so I wanted just to pause here for a lot of reasons. I tell people that the ingredient list is where you're going to find the information when you're selecting whole grains. Why? Because the ingredients on a product are listed in order of content. So you always want to look for the first ingredient to say whole wheat oats or whole grain flour. We can also use stone ground. So if you're seeing that in the first ingredients, then likely you're in the right lane. And then for the gluten-free, or as far as gluten-free, gluten-rich, you might want to look deeper into which is which. But at the end of the day, you want to again see whether or not it is stone ground, whole grain oats, whole wheat flour. You do not want to use enriched or bleached flour products. Even if it says unbleached or unenriched or any version of that, those are the ones that are more refined. So we have 2 lists here for your reference. The following on the left side there contain gluten, and then the ones on the right there are gluten-free. And I just want to go back to one point here. Those who do not have an actual diagnosis of celiac disease, we don't often recommend you doing gluten-free products because obviously the protein is essential. And if, again, you do not have an intolerance or an actual reaction to gluten, then it's not necessarily needed to go that route. So why are whole grains good for us? So we look at their inflammatory benefits, their heart health benefits, their lowering or controlling blood pressure, and then also for brain health. Okay, so the first shows their inflammatory. The Iowa Women's Health Study was 38,000 women there. 2 to 3 servings a day was what was born out of that study, versus women who rarely or never ate grains. So 2 to 3 servings a day is the highlight here. Those women who ate this amount were 30% less likely to die from an inflammatory related condition over a 17-year period. That's pretty significant. One, because it's a very large subject pool, and then also because it's over a long period of time that they studied this group of women. So that's pretty significant. Cardiac health. So fiber in and of itself helps to lower cholesterol. Well, how does it do that? It binds cholesterol in the gut and it helps to eliminate it from the body. So the more soluble fiber you're ingesting, the better your cholesterol will hopefully be. Now, there are two things that we cannot control. I'm going to pause and say this. There are two things that we cannot control, and that's age and our family history. These risk factors are not modifiable. However, with the diet, we try to modify our cardiac risk by lowering cholesterol. And in order to do so, again, we often recommend an increase in overall fiber intake. Now, the Nurses' Health Study, they had 75,000 women, and again, who ate 2 to 3 servings of whole grain products every day. They too were 30% less likely to have a heart attack or die from heart disease over a 10-year period versus women who ate less than 1 serving. For diabetes, we see that sugars were released slowly and steadily into the bloodstream. The diet that they gave the women in the Nurses' Health Studies 1 and 2, that was a total of 160,000 women. So again, this same trend, 2 to 3 servings of whole grains a day, 30% less likely to develop diabetes. And then cognitive impairment, same thing. Now we have 923 women, again, at least 3 servings a day, and there was a 53% reduction in developing dementia over 5 years. So what's the theme? The theme here is 2 to 3 servings a day minimum. Whole grain servings, what is that? Oatmeal, that's brown rice. That's what we say, just brown bread. Whole grain or whole wheat bread. And even things like quinoa, flaxseed. You can get soluble fiber as well, though, just as an aside, from fresh produce, from just the nuts, the skin, the seeds, the pulp of fresh produce. So, but again, it's about the soluble fiber and the grain. Okay, so let's go to refined grains, which is what we want to eat less of. Why are refined grains not so good for us? Because they are milled to remove the germ in the bran. Remember, we talked about the whole seed and the 3 parts. So we have either 1 or 2 parts that are removed in a refined grain. So then what happens there? Most of the nutrients are missing. So they have to be enriched with the vitamins and minerals that were removed in processing. So fiber is not always added back. However, B vitamins and iron, as I mentioned to you about the breakfast cereals and hot and dry breakfast cereals, and then also in bread products. Fiber is not always added back, and I want to pause here to say as well that some bread products even include food coloring to make them look brown, which is another reason why you want to go ahead and read the nutrition facts and the list of ingredients. Okay. So the other thing is that refined grains include white breads, white rice, white potatoes. And that's just as a general description so that you understand if we go brown, we're likely in a better lane. And this slide just shows us here that the difference between the whole grain versus white or refined grains again. So just as a reminder, these grains are higher in carbohydrates. They're digested and absorbed more quickly, which makes your blood sugar spike more quickly. And then they lead also to hunger cravings. The more you eat, I don't know if you've ever heard this, but the more you eat, sometimes the hungrier you'll get as you're eating them. So that's why you want to eat grains that have more fiber, because they give you a more full feeling. And then refined grains, lastly, are linked to obesity and other metabolic diseases. So why is the whole wheat better than the whole grain? So it's the type of grain that's being used. So both contain all 3 components of that seed, that kernel. And then the manufacturer can usually use the term whole grain or whole wheat if the type of the grain that's in the product is physically whole grain. So let's take, for instance, here's a participant question that we got before, and it was in relation to spelt bread, spelt being S-P-E-L-T. So what we know is that spelt is a type of grain that is closely related to wheat. However, it's very high in gluten content. So for those who have celiac disease or on a gluten-free diet, this would not be a choice for you. Now, could the manufacturer call this product, a whole grain? Well, certainly they could, because it's related. And if it contains the entire kernel, then they will put that there. But I put for you another example here. So the term whole wheat is exclusively used for products that only use the entire kernel. So I've put some examples there under which whole wheat is used, and then whole grain would be used. Now, all whole wheat products are whole grain, but not all whole grain products are whole wheat. Hopefully that helps you to better differentiate. So I just added this one here because a lot of times the labeling is about marketing. It's about drawing you in to the product so the product can be purchased off the shelf. It's simply that. So a lot of times I tell people to err on the back side of the product or the side of it where the nutrition facts and the ingredient list are, rather than to just look at the front labeling. But what I did provide here is some of the common labels that are found on manufacturer approved or FDA approved whole grain products. So you see here on the top left, 100% whole grain. It actually tells you how much is there. And then also Kellogg's, General Mills, each of them, Whole Grains Council, they all have their own whole grains labeling, and those are always approved labels. So you can look for those just as a sign. And then I also provided an ingredient list with the first ingredient circled so that you understand where to look for that whole wheat flour, whole grain oats. Okay? Now here's some easy ways to add grains into your day-to-day. So just a few examples here. Choosing whole grain or whole wheat pastas, chips, breads, bagels. I mean, just simply making a swap. So instead of white rice, doing brown rice or rice or cauliflower. Instead of regular chips that are usually fried, or even kettle chips actually that are fried as well, you can go with a tortilla. And then with bread and bagels, and then they also have thin sliced options, so that there's for those people who don't like to eat a lot of carbs in general. But instead of a bagel, even you could go with a whole grain English muffin, let's say, as a breakfast option. And then of course with popcorn, they have whole wheat options there when you're making stews and casseroles. And then also to add to your dairy in the morning. Or you can even add, if your cereal doesn't already have or isn't already a granola product, you can add granola and oats to that, to your cereals. And then finally, trail mix. That's an easy one, and you can make your own and put your own products in there. That way you can control the calorie, the carb, sugar, fiber content. All right, and just some final tips to go by here are: start with the familiar. With something that you already eat, just make a simple switch, a simple swap for a whole grain product, and do so gradually. If you're not eating any grains now, we don't ask you to go from 0 to 60. Just make little small steps. And then take little shortcuts as well. Brown rice does take a little longer to cook than white rice. However, you can try it with pasta or something else if you want more of a quick meal. And there are plenty of recipes out there on credible websites such as the American Heart Association and such, that you can go and get recipes to get started. And then rethink your snacks as to what you choose and where can you put whole grains in there. And then of course always try something new. So the recommendations that are out there, you can find them on the ChooseMyPlate.gov website, health.gov, Grains Foundation, even our organization, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. They'll all have Whole Grains Council. I didn't include there, but there are plenty of sources where you can go to find credible information, science-based, evidence-based information on how whole grains can help your overall health. So we have a quiz. Which part of the grain has the most fiber? And I believe we circled. I think it's actually the brand for the first one. The second question is, when a grain is processed or refined, what is removed? And the answer there is the German brand. And then lastly, which are always whole grain? And the answer there would be oatmeal. So for the last thing, I will just say to you again, protect your heart, be active, eat a well-balanced diet. Of course, see your doctor as recommended. Stay hydrated and sleep 6 to 8 hours. But what I would also like to do is touch on just a couple of audience questions really quickly before we go. Okay.
That would be great.
All right, wonderful. So one of those questions was about what are the ancient grains and what are their nutritional profiles? So there are 12 that I would like to mention here, and that's amaranth, millet, kamut, sorghum, teff, frike, farro, barley, quinoa, bulgur, rye, and fonio. And I think one of the things that I was asked was about, again, the nutrient composition. So of all the ones mentioned, the highest in calorie and carbs is going to be the fonio, F-O-N-I-O. And then the highest in protein is going to be the frike, F-R-E-E-K-E-H. And then the highest in fiber is going to be your rye. Another question, what is the difference between sprouted wheat and regular wheat bread? So the difference between the two is, again, the processing. So a sprouted whole grain product is processed such that it releases the vitamins and nutrients much easier. So then when you eat those products, the sprouted products, then they're more easily absorbed. So that would certainly be to your benefit if, again, malabsorption or anything like that has ever been an issue. But it also is good for grain health in general to eat sprouted products so that you can better absorb those nutrients. And there's another question, is it really necessary to remove grains and carbs for weight loss? The answer to that is actually no. Carbohydrates is the basis of our diet. It's like putting gas in a car. That's the only thing that it can run on. Well, not now because we have electric cars. However, it is the basis for our diet. So we do need some carbohydrates. But what we ask or what we recommend as dietitians is that the majority of those carbohydrates be grains and not and unrefined grains. And those would be, again, your whole wheat, your multigrain bread, brown rice, barley, quinoa, bran cereal, oatmeal. All of those things there can be the basis for your diet. Now, you only need a couple of grain servings per meal if you're eating a standard 3 meal a day regimen. You only need a couple of carbohydrate servings anyway. Anything over and above that would be in an excess. And for a lot of people, carbohydrates does cause bloating and excess weight gain. So just, again, mind your portions and make sure to go grain. And I do believe that was most of the questions. Did you have any others that we needed to answer, Robin?
You know, I think that was great, Lena. And there's so many grains out there, so much information about just carbs in general and grains, and it can be very overwhelming. So I really appreciate just that rundown of what those ancient grains are. I have, there's even a few on there that I hadn't heard of before, which was surprising. And so I think, really just reiterating the main points of just, going for whole grains, unrefined products as much as we can, and watching our portions and moderation, of course, and just being as diligent as we can to read our labels and our ingredient lists and just become the best educated consumers that we can be. So thank you so much, Lena.
You are so welcome. Thank you.